and call your attention to the Open Meetings Act posted here in the council chambers. If you now please join me in rising for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Granquist.
Here.
Arns.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
McCarthy.
Here.
Murin.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Clausen.
Here.
Hildebrand.
Here.
Okay, with that, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Then look for a motion to approve the full agenda.
So moved.
Motion and second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Okay, that takes us to item number 17 on the council agenda under the regular agenda. We look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5743 approving areas of proposed annexation to amend the corporate limits as authorized by section 16-117 Nebraska Revised Statutes 1943. Ordinance number 5743 passed on first reading at the September 7th, 2021 City Council meeting. And before we launch into discussion on that, I'm just going to provide a few comments and then ask staff, as we typically do at the introduction of ordinances and resolutions, to provide some commentary. But first, I think we're going to hear from a couple council members. Yes.
Your Honor, I will be abstaining, have a conflict of interest with this.
Your Honor, I'll be abstaining also.
Your Honor, I'll be abstaining also.
Okay.
Your Honor, I would offer for consideration ordinance number 5743 on second reading.
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second. So getting back to introducing discussion on this matter, as many of you may have been here 2 weeks ago, the council held a public hearing on the proposed annexation plan, backing up as to how we got here and why. We'll just cover a little bit of area in terms of annexation and the whys and hows. And like I said, I will ask staff to provide some commentary then on some of the questions that have been of particular interest over the last few weeks as we've been holding public dialogue on this. So annexation, why? The short of it, to adjust existing city limits to reflect natural growth that's occurred over decades and to facilitate orderly growth in the future to maximize the utility of public services. Just briefly touching on the process of this once again, the city, understanding the need to explore annexation, commissioned a study, a comprehensive annexation analysis of the community, contracted with Olson Associates back in 2017. Over the course of months and even a couple years, Olson Associates proposed ultimately a final plan, a map for proposed annexation to the council in late 2019. There were a few adjustments made to that map. The council was poised to bring that plan forward to the community early 2020. COVID restrictions inhibited that from happening, and the council decided to press pause until we were in a more stable period where public gatherings could be held and economic conditions stabilized. And so that places us to where we are today, having initiated a public process months ago that kicked off with public notices to people in the affected areas, a series of letters giving public notice to the process. The process included the Planning Commission holding a public hearing, and then the council holding a public hearing, and in between then a public open house that was held to address questions associated with annexation. So With that, I am going to ask Steve Ramus first, our Public Works Director, to address a few questions that have been recurring throughout this public discussion related to things like snow removal and street services. And then I will call on public safety staff to address some of the questions that we've had regarding the public safety components of this. But first, Steve, please.
Mayor, Council. A couple of the questions that were specifically asked and talked around had to do with snow removal and just general street maintenance and how we were anticipating that through this annexation process. So a couple comments on our snow plan and our streets capacity to handle additional streets with regard to snow removal. Beginning in 2019, we added a new plow at that time, and then we also replaced an older plow at that time. Both of those had an increased front axle capacity, so we could add heavier plows to those to enable us to cut through the snow and ice pack a lot more efficiently. The other thing that did, we also increased our hydraulics capability on those two systems so we could plow and work our sand salt or brine operation at the same time. So again, just a couple examples there of trying to be more efficient with the manpower we have through the use of technology within our equipment or just heavier equipment. The other thing we added in 2020, we added a snow pusher to the fleet. That is the plow apparatus itself. That enables us, one of the things we get a lot of complaints about is as we move through intersections, we get the windrow of snow through the intersection, and we have to circle back around and pick that up as part of our operation. The snow pusher adds some capability where I guess it just kind of eliminates that windrow through intersections. So again, it's just more efficient snow removal within our system. For 21, 22, the budget years that we'll be entering in October, as well as the next fiscal year, 22, 23, we'll be adding a new snow plow in each of those years. These will be substantially larger and outfitted with more equipment. So right now in town, we only use a front blade on our plows. These next two plows will have wing blades on the side as well as what we call an undercarriage blade or belly blade. Again, it's about moving more snow more efficiently with the staff we have. So those will be adds that we start to bring on with this new fiscal budget. Then just looking here at my comments, the other thing we're going to add is we've been visiting with other communities that have much more snow than we have, upwards of 20 events a year. I tend to travel up in some of those areas, and so I've been visiting with some of their street departments and looking at their equipment. And we're going to be adding a blade and wing blade potentially to a front end loader as well. They seem to be getting very, very efficient work out of that. And it just adds capability to what we can currently do with the fleet we have and the staff we have. Additionally, as we focus more just on street maintenance and our staffing within that division of our operation, 4 years ago we were budgeting around $350,000 to $400,000 a year within our street maintenance CIP budget. This year we're budgeting over the next couple of years $750,000 a year, and we see that we'll be continuing to increase that. So over the last 4 years we've seen almost a doubling in our budget that we're doing with street maintenance. The other thing we're doing there is some of that maintenance is done by contracts. We've really increased the amount of contracted service that we're doing in those areas, which again frees up our street maintenance staff to focus more on the preventative maintenance so that our streets don't get into a situation where they have to be substantially repaired or replaced. So those are some of the things, I guess, to answer some of the questions with regard to snow removal and street maintenance.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Other questions have arisen regarding public safety and the city's capacity to cover newly annexed areas. And so I wondered if Assistant City Administrator Scott Cordes might, or Chief Miller, or both, might be willing to come forward to talk about that.
Certainly, Mayor and Council, from the onset of the annexation conversation, public safety's been at the table, considering all the proposed decisions that you're all considering making, so they'd be ready for that when the time came. And so we've certainly looked at call volume, the response areas geographically, what we would need to service those areas. And so that's been on the forefront from the beginning. And the citizen requests that have come in and have asked us about that they're legitimate questions. No one should ever take public safety for granted, and we enjoy answering those questions because we need to stay on top of that and do our due diligence in that regard. Specifically, as the call volume increases, we do what we traditionally do. We come to you folks and explain that to you, and we deal with that accordingly. A few years ago, we hired 6 additional firefighters for that basic reason. The call volume was exhausting our resources and leaving us with both stations empty on multiple occasions, and so you provided that resource. The only thing I can tell you in regard to that from the fire and EMS response is every subject area that's in this annexation we're already servicing. So each of those pieces currently reside in the Norfolk Rural Fire Protection District, and we have a contract to service those areas. So none of these areas, in terms of taking on new additional call volume, is adding to the total we already have. When I report to you, we have 2,500 fire calls last year, fire or EMS calls. That included all of these areas as part of the Rural Fire Protection District. It's not broken out separately. So we don't anticipate that in of itself creating that tipping point. If society in general, if the nature of our citizenry, the traffic counts, all those things would warrant that, we would certainly come to you all just like we always have and say, we're getting stretched thin and we need to provide additional staffing to support those needs. And so we don't anticipate that today based on what I've described, at least on the fire and EMS side, but we're certainly cognizant of it. We've considered everything from building a 3rd station if we needed to adding staffing, to adding equipment, whatever those things might be, if the facts justify that. So that kind of a nutshell where we're at on the fire and EMS side. I know Chief Miller's had significant conversation about this, worked with Sheriff Volk to talk about their overlapping jurisdictions and their response mode, and I'll let Chief Miller speak directly to that part of it.
Thanks, Scott. Mayor and Council, I'll address a couple of the questions that I've fielded relating to the law enforcement side of it. Obviously law enforcement was involved with these conversations a year ago. I mean, these conversations have been going on for a long time. So as part of that, it's our due diligence to make sure we're doing the what if scenarios. If certain things happen, how are we going to plan accordingly? The annexation is one of those what if scenarios, along with other growth situations that the community has. And one of the things I'd like to point out, currently, all of the areas that are being looked at being annexed are currently being served by the Madison County Sheriff's Office. Once that annexation takes effect, then Norfolk Police would have primary jurisdiction over that. That doesn't mean that all of us in the Sheriff's Office stops responding. We have a great working relationship. They are still available to respond to all those calls. Currently, if we get a call in city limits and we need help because we are busy, the Sheriff's Office will come in and assist, and vice versa. We recently did interlocals with them, so if they need help out in the county. So we are constantly working on where the priorities are, where the busy situations are. If you have a major incident someplace, we can adjust our resources to make sure we accommodate that. So, the study was there, but I agree with Mr. Cordes that I can't come in and say today I need X number of people. I also can't say that in the future I won't be coming here to say that I need more based on the circumstances that present themselves. We want to be good stewards of our resources. We take the safety of our community very, very seriously, and we will never put that at risk. But as we get into this, if this goes through, we'll continually to assess our needs, our calls for service, our patrol mileage, the things that we're going to need to do, and we'll make an accurate assessment if we have those needs. Once we can articulate what those needs are, then we will be able to bring that forward in a proper manner. But in the meantime, the Sheriff's Office will still serve those areas like they always have, in addition to the police department. you know, they're, and we'll be ready to go. You know, we've been working on having conversations with Sheriff Volk. In fact, he's here for an unrelated matter, but he's also here and understands and recognizes that, you know, this is a venture with law enforcement. We're always working together. And as we move forward, it's not like they're not gonna be there. So I'm comfortable we can handle it in the short term, and we'll be ready the day after if it would pass, we'll be ready right away. We're already working on maps and those types of things so that if it passes, we don't have that learning curve. We'll be ready to go either way. So, any particular questions that we can answer?
Doesn't look like it right now.
Right.
But
In addition, we have Nebraska State Patrol who has jurisdiction, and they regularly come in and help us as well. So we all work together to where those priority needs are.
Thank you. Scott, Chief Miller. Another area in which I've had questions, I think other council members have had questions as well, is budgeting. How does this affect the city's budget? Is the city just doing this for financial interest? Where does, if the tax base is broadened, how is that money spent? So I want to have Andy Colvin, our city administrator, address some of those things in terms of our budget process as a city, which, by the way, we just finalized for this fiscal year. In fact, the last meeting, the budget was formally adopted. So, Andy, could you provide some commentary on that issue, please?
Sure, Mayor and Council. Brianna, would you be able to help me get linked into I'm plugged in over here.
Okay.
So, bring up the screen to show some
Yep,
slides. Just for, I guess, some background, the city's budget is composed of, well, the general fund. We'll look at general fund. We're not going to look at utility funds right now. But as far as general fund goes, you have sales tax, you have property tax, then you have our Nebraska Public Power District lease. The city does own the electrical distribution system within the city, and so as part of NPPD managing that system for us, we do get a lease payment from them. Thank you, Brianna. So here's the chart that I think, or one of the charts, so feel free to ask me if there's another chart that you would like. But this really breaks down our general fund revenues of where it is. It's more detailed there on the right-hand side, but in the chart we'll see there's four primary areas where the city general fund gets its revenue. Property tax makes up just under 20% of our entire general fund. The rest of that is, as I said, sales tax, MPPD lease, and other revenue, which includes Keno funding. It includes charges for licenses and permits and other miscellaneous funding. Another interesting chart. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, sorry.
Nope, you're fine.
You're going to the question I had, so
Yep.
go ahead. Yep.
So this one is our sales tax growth for the city that we've seen. Now, the three really tall bars in the middle cannot really be looked at because that was a special half-cent occupation tax put in place specifically for the library. That did drop off once the library was done. So those aside, you can see that our sales tax growth has been fairly good in the past number of years. Was there a specific question you had, Mayor, on the sales tax?
No, I wanted to make the point that sales tax receipts, which is a primary source of funding, in fact, the largest source of funding for the city of Norfolk, has increased significantly over recent years. And so that's been reflected in our budget as a whole for the community in terms of growth, in terms of new business coming in and spurring new sales tax receipts has allowed for expanded public services, and I think you're getting to that in the next slide in disbursements.
Before we get there, this is just a background on our MPPD lease that we get. It's remained relatively flat for the last several years just because MPPD has held the rate steady, and we have no indication that is going to change, at least that we've heard from MPPD anytime soon. But if we do, usually we get some kind of a notification that is going to happen. Assessed valuation of the city has grown, similar to what you would see in most communities. That is not levy growth. That is specifically valuation growth that is put on by the county assessor. Our levy rate comparison is one that, as you can see, Norfolk is the third lowest, and even with the proposed budget that we've adopted this coming next fiscal year, we are still going to be the third lowest of cities that are comparable to our size in the state of Nebraska for our tax levy rate. Property tax overview. This shows where, if you are in Norfolk, where your tax dollars go. We are approximately 13% based on 2020 levy rates of the overall tax bill in Norfolk. The rest of that, as you can see, goes to Madison County, Northeast Community College, the school district, and then other organizations, NRD, and some other property tax users and subdivisions of the state. General fund expenditures. This, as you can see, police and fire there are a large part of our general fund expenditures, street maintenance, parks and recreation, and then general administration, which includes all of the finance and what it takes to help the city continue to function. Planning and development, housing, library, and then engineering. So here is where our tax dollars go. I would say that the city is in a very good financial position and has been demonstrated by our revenue growth that we've had, and we've also tried to hold the line on expenditures as well, really only capturing those that would improve the level of service. As you've indicated, streets is one of those key areas that we have made a conscious effort to improve and spend more on for street maintenance, as you can see by equipment that Steve had indicated before to help us do that better. Is there any questions, Mayor and Council?
Okay. Thank you for running through that, Andy. And I did want to note too, in discussion of this, of all the areas that are proposed for annexation, so there is city fiscal obligation responsibility that comes with that, clearly, with the services that need to be expanded. So if you did an analysis of all the annexed areas, this is almost a break-even situation for the city of Norfolk in terms of broadened tax base versus services required.
Correct.
Break even, or perhaps even a net negative impact for the city of Norfolk. Is that correct?
I think Randy actually did that, and it's pretty close to being a break even.
Yes, if you go through and add up the net cost or the net benefit of all the annexation areas as contained in the boundary study, it shows about $250,000 net cost, but that's misleading. The biggest driver of that is the airport annexation, and that's $284,000 of that $254,000. Without that, it'd be a $30,000 net benefit. And what's driving that big net cost for the airport is that they're outside of the 2.5-mile radius from a fire station. And the annexation study assumed if you're outside of that 2.5-mile radius, the city will be building another fire station to serve that area, and they allocated the cost based on number of acres. The airport's basically, for the most part, open ground, runways, that type of thing. Nobody lives there. We have no plans of building a fire station because of that. So, like the mayor said earlier, basically this is a wash if you had to take out the impact of the airport, which is falsely skewed high because of the fire.
Thank you, Randy. Any questions, council, before we move forward? Okay, so 2 weeks ago we did have the official public hearing on this matter, but state law does allow for discussion, open discussion on second reading of an ordinance of this kind. And so at this point, we will allow for that, operating under the same rules that we used during the public hearing, and that being that each speaker has one opportunity to speak, that there will be a time limit of 5 minutes with appropriate warnings given by our city clerk here, Brianna, and that we will conduct this discussion by Robert's Rules of Order, which are in place to ensure a respectful and orderly and efficient discussion. So if there is anyone wishing to make public or make comment or add to the discussion at this period, they can do so now.
Let's get her done. I started it and I'm going to finish it. I just have a few comments to submit to the panel. As events unfold in the United
Ma'am,
States...
for public record,
Oh,
can you
Julie
give us our name?
Thompson, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
apologize. As events unfold in the United States and around the world, it is hard not to see some similarities in how this mass annexation is being managed in certain global events. The term that I keep returning to is tyranny. Defined by Merriam-Webster, tyranny is oppressive power, especially oppressive power exerted by government. It fits this situation simply because it has become quite apparent that this mass annexation was decided long ago by this panel. The legal requirements to achieve this self-serving goal was merely an imposition on this panel, but these procedures needed to be followed for the council to be in compliance with said requirements. What this panel is doing is disgraceful and makes a mockery of the democratic process that should be taking place. No meaningful discussion has taken place in this public forum regarding the mass annexation. No meaningful exchanges have taken place between council members and the public offering up their concerns. At the last meeting on September 7th, the only attempt made at any discussion by this panel was among themselves and their concern over snow removal. And if you think for 1 minute anybody sitting here is concerned about snow removal, you'd be sadly mistaken. It was a very sorry excuse for a discussion, was merely for show. All of you are putting good people through hell and a lot of worry where none should be at this point in time. There may be a need for this type of mass annexation in the future, but Norfolk is not going to become a Lincoln or Omaha, as it seems to aspire to do, even within the next 10 years. If it becomes necessary for this type of mass annexation, there are better ways to do it. And even so, this could have been done better had there only been some honesty, concern, respect, and transparency given to all the people being negatively impacted by this mass annexation. I urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify?
My name is Pete Becker, and I live outside the city limits. I live inside the city's 2-mile jurisdiction, so I have no representation, nor can I vote for mayor or any city council members. According to Mayor Moaning, there are many reasons for annexation, but the one I hear the most is Mayor Moaning's statement in his letter to the editor of September 4th, 2021. Ultimately, there is also a fairness question regarding annexation that elected officials must consider. Why should the household on South 8th Street or Hayes Avenue be required to pay the same amount of taxes to support the parks, library, fire protection, and city streets that a household just outside existing limits uses but does not pay the same amount of taxes for? End quote. The mayor's statement is just like me trying to understand cryptocurrency. I can't get my brain around it. First, everyone from out of town who works here or shops here or just comes to the 4th of July or summer concerts at Skyview Park must also not be paying their fair share. Yet, according to the 2020 updated version of the Norfolk Boundary Study, which is your publication, the Parks and Recreation Services, Library Services, and Fire Protection Services, there's no impact in anticipated either way. As to the fairness question, what about 3 families that live in Bel Air Addition next to Skyview Lake? They all live in $200,000 houses. Family 1 is a retired couple who never had children and now spends 6 months of the year in their other house in Arizona. Family 2 has 2 children with a fenced yard, a jungle gym, and a pool. They very seldom leave their home except to workshop and take their children to the parochial school for which they pay tuition. Family 3 has 4 children. They are very active at Skyview. They fish, rollerblade, frisbee golf, and play on the playground equipment. The children also go to the public school and participate in many activities such as all types of athletic activities. Please help me understand how this is fair, as they are all paying the same amount of taxes. The mayor also stated in his letter to the editor, quote, "As this discussion progresses, it is my hope we can listen, learn from each other, and respect one another as reasonable beings, all seeking to live together harmoniously within a community." End quote. The word community has the most relevance to me because I feel a part of a community, even though I live outside the city limits. There are 34 parcels of study in study group in study group area 1.1 where I live. 30 of those have homes with occupants. All 30 homes were contacted with a petition which gave them the option to be for annexation, against annexation, or non-committal. I handed that out the last time. I don't know if anybody even looked at it, but here's another copy of it. 29 households signed the petition, and 100% of them were against annexation. One household did not sign because of a conflict of interest. However, the mayor evidently thinks we are unreasonable and do not want to live harmoniously within a community. I have property within the city limits as well as in study area 1.1 where I live. The roads and services where I live are taken care of by Madison County and are far superior to the majority of streets and services taken care of in the city of Norfolk. We also have and pay for fire and rescue and have access to Madison County Sheriff law enforcement. If annexed, our taxes will go up over 17.5% in year 1, considerably more in year 2, and even more in year 3. The bottom line is our services go down and our costs go up. In my opinion, there's only one reason and one reason only the city wants to annex us, and that is money. The governor of Nebraska has proposed a 1.7% increase for each of the next 2 years. Madison County passed their budget for 3.44% increase, and your mayor and city council, according to the September 1st issue of the Norfolk Daily News, are increasing their disbursements from $39.9 million in fiscal 19 and 20 to $75.5 million in fiscal 21-22. This is an increase of 88% in 2 years. This leads me to think that more money from the annexation to fuel their out-of-control spending, they need more money to fuel their out-of-control spending. I wonder if the city has followed all the necessary procedures and done so in a timely manner. The issue should be tabled until you study this. At the very least, I think you should vote no or table it at this meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, Mayor and council members. My name is Wayne Onisor, PhD. You may refer to me as Dr. Onisor. First, I must express that I am here as a resident of the proposed annexation area 1.4.2. My personal comments are in no way representative of my employer. Next, I realize that based on the September 7th, 2021 hearing that regarding the annexation, that little, if anything, of what I'm about to say will truly be listened to by the members of the City Council able to comment on the annexation or the mayor. What I will say is based on the information and facts that I have been able to find, they have been combined with the observations from that hearing and other actions taken at that hearing. I will ad lib here. I wish you would have presented some of the information you had tonight at the actual hearing. It would have been far more helpful. While I understand that I did not give any testimony during the hearing, I am speaking up now as the voices that echoed my opposition have been ignored or pushed aside. Before going any further, I'd like to point out that 2 of the city council members said nothing during the hearing process. They are Councilman Hildebrand and McCarthy. I must applaud the effort of Councilman Granquist to attempt to clear up some of the points of concern with Mr. Ramos. To the contrary, I'm disappointed with Mayor Moning's approach to addressing the questions and concerns presented during testimony. He chose to respond after the hearing was closed to those questions and concerns he chose to address. By doing so, individuals were cut off from an orderly manner to respond to comments made by the mayor. Congratulations, Mayor Moning. You have aptly demonstrated you're a politician through such a maneuver. If that wasn't enough, neither you or the city council members made any acknowledgement during the hearing of the petition, which I signed, by Mrs. Geiger made mention during her testimony. If this is how the mayor and city council respond to citizen-led opposition to what they are doing, I have no desire to be a resident of such a city. Councilman Jackson told us a story about the sitting council that made the decision to protect life and property by construction of flood control for the Norfolk of the Elkhorn River. While the resulting treatment of the city council was regrettable, I fail to see the direct connection other than the so-called tough decision being made. The current annexation is not about ensuring protection to the city residents of Norfolk. Should the proposed forced annexation be adopted, both old and new residents will see a decrease, at least in temporary, based on what I heard tonight, of police services. With no plans to add additional officers to the force or on duty, this is to be expected. According to the 2020 census, Norfolk has 24,955 residents. The city currently has 41 police officers, from police chief down to the 2 newest hires currently at the academy. This puts the city at 1 officer for every 608.7 residents. Using the estimated population numbers from the boundary study and only those that align with the current annexation areas, so I'd have to exclude much of 3.1, and since I don't have updated numbers from that study, I cannot include those areas included by the annexation. You have a current conservative population estimate of 1,084 that will be added. By doing the simple math, the forced annexation will put the city of 1 officer for every 635 residents. To make up the difference, that would be an additional 2 officers. So logic would tell us that with increased land area and residents to cover, the number of police officers on staff and no shift changes, that the current residents of Norfolk will see a decrease in available law enforcement services. I hope the council and mayor have explained that to their current constituents. Now, I'm aware that Mayor Moning attempted to address this by stating how safe of a city Norfolk has been rated. I looked up these ratings. The National Council for Home Safety and Security gave Norfolk the highest rating at number 3 for the state. However, this particular rating entity excluded any city under 10,000 in population. As a refresher, that excludes a large proportion of the cities in Nebraska. It's far easier to place higher with less competition. Safewise.com rated Norfolk at number 7. New Home Source didn't even place Norfolk in the top 10. Safety.com also did not have Norfolk in the top 7 that they list. Another issue I have, and even with the explanation tonight, is with the fiscal responsibility of the city council and mayor. Using the estimated cost and benefit numbers from the boundary study, and again, only for those areas that align with the current annexation, we find that the listed benefit to the city is $1,362,000 and $104, with a cost of $1,756,279. That's a difference of $394,175 in the negative, which very much contradicts what was given to us tonight. No plan has been presented as to how that difference will be accounted for once the annexation goes through. The city may have 1 year to plan to get that together. That's a good-sized bill to run up first. If a plan is already in place on how to handle it, why hasn't it been shared, or at least in summary, on the annexation of the city's website? Overall, the appearance the city council and mayor are giving is that they have something to hide. I'm only telling you what it looks like from the outside. There is a lack of information from the city. The city leaders have refused to acknowledge a petition that opposes them, cherry-picking city ratings from outside entities without using them in context, closing the hearing before answering questions given during testimony to avoid cross-examination, use of the bare minimums of timetables. If the mayor and the
5
city
minutes has
council...
expired. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify?
My name's Gina Lindsay. Just a couple of comments. We've been hearing that the proposed annexation is to allow for natural and orderly growth. And I'd like to know, how does that fit into not including AWG, Nucor Cold Finish, and Volcraft when areas west and south of there are proposed to be annexed? Doesn't seem natural or orderly. And also, fairness has been brought up multiple times, and in my opinion, it doesn't seem fair that all the questions that were asked 2 weeks ago were addressed a few minutes before we had a chance to make comments. Gives us no chance to study that information and be able to have an intelligent conversation or discussion as it's been proposed to be.
So one of the questions there I don't think was addressed last week, and it's a fair question. AWG and other industrial areas, that gets into a discussion of what are called county industrial tracts, and maybe I could have staff help me with that as to why they are not included in the annexation plan.
County industrial tracts were developed in Nebraska law probably in the 50s and 60s, somewhere in there. They've been around for a long time. So they are, we cannot annex them. They were designed so that the industry has to dissolve the county industrial tract and annex themselves. So we can't legally do it. State law does not permit us to do that. So, I mean, unless there's some type of a process the industry itself would have to go through, we cannot annex them. Period.
Andy, is it fair to say those policies were put in place at that time as an incentive for industry development in communities?
Correct.
Anyone else wishing to comment? Okay, hearing no one else. Okay.
I am Lauren Clement from Hinkle Oil Company. And my approach is a lot different than the rest of them. I kind of speak from my heart. And I love dry humor. And a lot of the things that I've shared have been even tonight have come from my customers. Except I know there's a time limit for everybody except the mayor. And so I'm going to start with a story that a customer shared with me about this situation. But before I do that, I feel from my heart that you're not listening to us at all. I think it was expressed very clearly, you don't represent us. You represent the people in your district. And so we need to somehow let the people in your district know how this annexation hurts them. But before I do that, the story goes like, well, I am a pro-life Amendment to free speech Democrat. That isn't an oxymoron, I don't know what is. I never left the party left me. And I know many of you people think we're morons because we don't have the expert telling us what to do. And so the story goes like this. There's two morons sitting on the railroad bridge because the city was railroading a plan through without even us getting straightforward, well, because of the procedure that it's done. The big one fell off. Why didn't the little one? Anybody know? He was a little moron. Right? And we need that. I love dry humor. So if you have clean dry humor, stop by at the station when we fill your propane tanks and let me know. Man, I live on dry humor. You've got to laugh on something that is funny. We start out with silent prayer, and one of my customers said the only way you're going to win is through prayer. And so I thought, maybe I have the freedom yet to pray. Do I? The Lord's Prayer says, Dear Heavenly Father, we want to respect and honor your name in everything we do and say. We pray that you'll help us remember that this is not your kingdom. And your kingdom will come, and we pray that your will be done here on earth in this meeting, just like as it is in heaven. You promise to supply our needs through your riches in Christ Jesus, not our wants. He promised to supply our needs according to his riches. He promises to protect us and use us even in the presence of our enemies. He wants us to forgive others as he has forgiven us. He asks us through the power of the Holy Spirit to say no to temptation so he can deliver us from evil. Because we know that his is the honor and the glory, but now forevermore. Amen. I feel this public hearing, some of you know I'm for annexation. But the procedure here has been a colossal mess. There's been some tremendous mistakes, and I not only beg you, I warn you, please consider this whole thing before you railroad this thing through. And then also, some of you have asked that we could meet together. One of my...
Sir, please speak into the microphone for the record.
One of my customers has Zion Congregational Church is available for public hearing, so we can work a plan of action tomorrow night at 7 o'clock and any night after that. I'd like to work a plan of action because united we stand, but divided we fall. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment?
How's it going tonight, Mayor, Council? My name is Adam Geiger. I am outside of the city limits in the Eastern Heights area. I moved outside of city limits about 25 years ago. I enjoy the freedoms outside of city limits. I appreciate just being able to be outside and have a 14-year-old be able to drive to school. Things, little things like that that really don't matter mostly to the council, but things like that that actually do matter to people like us that do live outside of the city. I have been a firefighter, reserve firefighter in Norfolk. I've served committees. I have been a big part of this community. So I do take offense when you talk about we are not members of the community. Not a one of you is an elected official that I ever got to vote for, but you are making my decisions, and that is not fair. A lot of the community members are very upset the way this went transposed because it seems like it was closed door, quiet. It seems like every single one of you, I've talked to 3 of the councilmen here, and you all have your mind made up. There is no changing your decisions. And that's not right. It is like you're not listening to the people that are being affected by this, and that's not fair. And when we are annexed in, which I'm sure will happen, we will vote for that. We will change that. I do ask some questions that I'd like answered if you guys would tonight. The subcommittee that pushed through the alignment for annexation was made of 4 council members and the mayor. And 2 of those council members have to sit to the side for conflict. So was that right? I mean, is that a fair reasoning that they were able to vote for and push and align, but then they can't actually be in part of the process? My other questions, and that was Clausen and Murrin, those are the 2 that are not able to, but were involved at that committee. But honestly, my real question to the 5 of you up here that can vote is, what would it take to change your mind? And if you could honestly answer this, we'd appreciate it. Because in my neighborhood, we had 74 people in a 2-day survey signed, or 74 houses signed that they were against this. And I've heard this from other neighborhoods. There are a lot of people that are not in favor of how this is going on. And then each one of you, it seems like your decision has already been made and there is no choice. And we want to know, what can we do to change your mind? You're our elected officials. You are the people that are making our decisions, but we don't get anything out of that. I mean, we're not getting feedback from you guys, just that it's a great thing. So if you, the rest of my time, if you guys could answer, we would really appreciate that as a community, inside and outside of the city limits. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Hank Scott, live in SID 3, East Norfolk Avenue. I know there was a survey conducted in our neighborhood, and again, most everyone was against the annexation. My biggest concern is that our mill levy was set highest of all of the SIDs around here so that we could take care of our water issue and our street issues. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars fixing up our streets, and now there's an ordinance that says all city property or city people within the city need to have curb, gutter, and sidewalk. What happens to all that money that we spent? Is it going to get tore up and wasted? Talking with Mr. Mayor here, he assured me that that would not happen, that since we had the hard surface roads, that things would be left alone. We wouldn't need the sidewalks and the curb and gutter. Curb and gutter gets tore up by the snow plows anyway, so then it's more repair work and more work. Mr. Mayor, if you would give us in writing that we do not have to tear up our streets and redo them, then I don't have such a problem with the annexation. But that is my concern. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment? Okay, if not, we will move into discussion among the council. And with that, I've spoken probably enough already, so I will turn it over to council for any questions or comments on the process or the plan itself.
Well, I will try to answer part of the question, and that is that, like I mentioned this at the last meeting that we had, I was not expecting a huge turnout from citizens of the Third Ward who are in favor of annexation to show up. Typically speaking, when people are against it, that they are going to show up, and they certainly have a right to do so. My decision and my vote is cast by the wishes and the comments that I get from the folks that elected me. And overwhelmingly, it is to have the annexation, because they feel that the city needs to grow, and to be able to do that, it takes annexation. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Just a couple things, and I think I'll hit on that same question for you. But before I get into that, maybe we could hit on 2 council members being in that subcommittee and whether that's an issue or not.
That is a good question. We did have similar questions when we started down this process, and so that was something that I cleared with the Nebraska Accountability and Disclosure Commission. So they weren't able to participate in the final deliberations, but they were able to participate in conversations that took place during subcommittee. So we did handle all of that by the book. But that is a good question because we did have the same.
And one other that I'll hit on and is talking about the streets. And I think we hit on that some last meeting where if the streets are not tore up or they don't have any issues, they were going to be left alone. Am I thinking correctly on that, Steve?
Yeah, that's correct. You know, we have a 10-year capital improvement program that's published as part of our budget process. And, you know, we have areas south of NPPD over there in that older section of town that are still gravel streets. They might have blotter. There's no curb and gutter. You know, we don't have any plan to go in there and take care of those streets that are already in city limits. Certainly as we would go forward and have public meetings about our 1 and 6 year street program and we take input from people that attend, and if people out there in those SIDs attend those meetings and express a desire to do something different, if there's drainage issues, street maintenance issues, whatever those things are, we take that into consideration at that meeting. We gather input, we put dots on maps, and then we reprioritize for the next year. And so it'll just be an ongoing process, but there's no, you know, our budget's very transparent, very open to the public, and if we're going to do something there, we'd have to reallocate funds somewhere else, and I certainly don't see that happening. I, you know, just looked at the Norfolk Avenue Bridge this morning as a function of the mill and overlay there, and we got a $1.9 million project there that we're going to have to get done so we can keep that connection to the extremities of the community and you know, keep our economy moving without having to close that down because it starts to fail. So there's a lot of needs out there within our existing streets, and through the annexation process, we would incorporate those streets into our city street program and have conversations with those neighbors in those areas, prioritize accordingly.
As far as the Eastern Heights area, which is 1.4.2, a lot of the concern out there is that they're being annexed in with no growth possibilities because of the county line. Is there a concern there, or what is that? That would be, how can you address that?
There's no restriction on municipalities being able to annex beyond county lines. There's cities, I mean, in the larger cities, Omaha's one of them, but I don't know if there's any ones that are our size that currently do that. But there's no restriction on that. Cities can exist in more than one county. And I will just add to what Steve just was discussing in the gentleman's comment about streets and streets that are currently in. And I don't want to put Danny and Steve on the spot, but I believe state statute that if you have an improved road today, meaning paved, that you cannot be assessed for that if it were to be improved or torn out or replaced at some point. My understanding is state law provides that is the city's responsibility and is at that point considered more of a maintenance item if a street's already in. Is that correct?
Yes, Andy, that's been our interpretation of state statute. I mean, when you're talking about a road that's gravel, that's completely different than one that there's already been improvements made. At that point, that as the way we've all read the statute, it then becomes more of a maintenance as opposed to a new street.
I think the only thing I would add there for clarification is when land is developed, the original developer is responsible for paying for the water, sewer, and street infrastructure that goes into a new development. So you look around the community, Legacy Bend, Blackberry, Wyndham Hills, Walters, East Knolls, those developers pay for all the water, sewer, and streets that go into those developments. And so the theory there is once it's in as a function of the original development or in, and then becomes city, we as a city are responsible for the maintenance, repair, reconstruction as it goes forward. If it's a gravel street, the concept would be that the adjacent properties never had to pay for the hard surface infrastructure as a function of developing their properties and then selling those. So that's kind of my way I look at it, I guess.
So I'll follow up now a little bit of what you could do to change our mind. And yeah, it's pretty difficult. You already saw all green up there last meeting of 5 votes. And that stems from somewhat of what Rob said. There's many of people in the community that have reached out and said, we believe it's time for this also. Many of the times that these decisions aren't easy. I mean, obviously it's, when you have a room full of people and it was completely packed 2 weeks ago, it doesn't make it easy. But it's those tough decisions when you have others that don't show up for a meeting. Even if you ask them to show up for a meeting, they don't come, but they want to express their opinions privately. And trying to get those out, it's difficult to do. But one of the things that came up, and I got it in an email also, and I don't recall who it came from, and it really doesn't matter, is the city's not expanding out to the east. And obviously I'm over in Ward 1, so anybody that knows where I live, it's the east side of the flood control. I grew up on the west side of the flood control, and there was nothing on the east side of the flood control for the most part. But look at it now, and we've made it out to suburban acres, or Eastern Heights. I live in the Walters addition out there, and it keeps just going east and further east and a little bit north, obviously up to Benjamin. And the college has moved all the way out to the highway also. And then the apartments just keep on going along that bypass, if you want to call it that. So we've definitely been growing east just as much as we've grown in every other direction. And so it seems like a mass annexation. I guess it is a mass annexation, but mostly I think because some of this should have been done a long time ago, before any of us ever came up here. There should have been probably portions brought in and annexed at certain times, and for reasons unbeknown, it just never happened. So, yeah, I would say, yeah, it's very difficult to change our mind, but it's not something that I think I take lightly. It's not something that I'm up here cheering her on that this is an awesome thing. It's a situation I'm kind of stuck in. And somebody's got to make that tough decision at some point. And today's one of those days.
Any other comments or questions, Council? I just wanted to, if not, I wanted to address just a couple things because, I recognize this is not an easy process. That's probably why it's been held off until now, because Norfolk has grown over the decades and the city limits were never adjusted to reflect that fact. And I think that's probably because this is a hard process. And it naturally brings up questions that a lot of you folks brought forward to us, and I'd have a number of the same. And I realize on these things everybody has opinions and some strong feelings, and we're all entitled to those, but we're not entitled to our own facts. And I just want to clear up a few things that bothered me that were said tonight in terms of really accusations about the process not being fair or following the letter of the law or being transparent, because that is completely false. This process is spelled out in state law as to how it should occur in cities, And we followed that process to a T and went above and beyond in certain circumstances to allow for more public input than is required by state law during the annexation process. So let's be clear about that. There was no lack of transparency in this. This was an open process going back to 2017, involving numerous subcommittee meetings of the council, and then ultimately 3 different notifications of affected property owners, 2 public hearings conducted at the planning commission level, at the city council level, plus an open house that was hosted by city officials and city staff to allow for conversations that were one-on-one, that were personal, that weren't constrained by time limits, so we could delve into some of these issues thoroughly, and public discussion tonight. So again, let's be clear about what that was. And secondly, accusations that this in some way, somehow, is a money grab by the city of Norfolk. I think you can see through the analysis, again, going to facts, that this is no such thing. This is a hard decision made by elected officials who have to have in mind the well-being of the community today, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now. And what we hear on a daily basis is that people want this community to grow, and businesses want more workers, and young people want job opportunities. To do that, you have to have a community that is open to growth and has the willingness and the courage and the vision to explore the opportunities for growth. This is a part of that process to facilitate orderly growth, not to mention the fact that our city limits do not make logical or geographical sense at this point. So I just want to address those things because, again, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but we're not entitled to our own facts. So we're at that point, unless there's any further discussion or questions or comments among council.
Sorry,
Ma'am, we've had our discussion period already. No, we had our public discussion period.
I can't ask you to address the discrepancy.
You've had the opportunity.
In the first vote, okay.
Had the opportunity.
Yeah.
And again, there is a process to these things. And we've carried this out according to legal processes. Any further discussion among the council? Okay, hearing none, short title, please.
An ordinance of the city of Norfolk, Nebraska to annex to said city a part of sections 9, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 24, 25, 29, 30, 31, 32, 34, and 35, Township 24 North, Range 1 west of the 6th PM, Madison County, Nebraska, and part of sections 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, and 16, Township 23 North, Range 1 west of the 6th PM, Madison County, Nebraska, and part of section 24 and the east half of section 25, Township 24 North, Range 2 west of the 6th PM, Madison County, Nebraska, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith, and to provide that this ordinance shall be published in pamphlet form.
Please vote.
Voting in the affirmative, Granquist, Merrill, McCarthy, Jackson, Hildebrand. Abstaining from the vote, Arns, Murin, and Clausen. Ordinance number 5743 carries on second reading.
Item number 18, I would entertain a motion to consider approving an interlocal agreement between the City of Norfolk and Madison County for the Norfolk Police Division to provide dispatch communication services.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion second, and for some background on this, please, Chief Don Miller.
Mayor and City Council, shortly I'll be joined by Sheriff Volk. What's before you is actually a very positive step in our process. For years, Norfolk and Madison County have viewed the possibility of joining our dispatch centers. Madison County currently has 2 separate dispatch centers, and as we looked at it and the expenses of running a dispatch center, it's a very expensive endeavor. So with the relationships that the sheriff and Norfolk have had and continue to improve over the years, we looked at joining our dispatch centers into one. You've already seen the budget that we proposed previously. This interlocal agreement is the next step in that process, and this will allow us to start the dispatching at the City of Norfolk Police Division Dispatch Center as of October 1st. Now, when we look at this, it's not like you're flipping a switch and changing from from Madison to Norfolk or vice versa. There's a lot of people that have been involved in this process. There's a lot of work that goes involved to include staffing issues, structural issues, frequencies, towers, radios, phone lines. There's a lot of things that come together, and this is going to be the accumulation of years of hard work. Currently, Norfolk has 3 dispatch stations. Madison has 2. We're in the process of joining them. We don't have the renovation process done, but when we're done renovating the police station, we will have a total of 6 stations, 1 extra for possible future expansion. But in the meantime, we will operate within our current 3 stations, and we'll change an office into a 4th station so that we can function temporarily while we do some construction. This agreement was reviewed by both the city attorney and the county attorney, and it was passed by the Madison County commissioners last week, and as in front of you for your evaluation as well. I don't know if Sheriff Volk has anything to add. This is something, like I've said before, we don't take things lightly. We want to make sure that we do everything we can as best we can. The plan is that it may not necessarily save a lot of dollars today, but in the future, as we know that there's a bunch of big expenses coming down the line, we'll be able to share those expenses instead of both of us having to bear the burden for 2 separate dispatch centers. So, like I say, I'd entertain any questions, but this is a great opportunity. Unless you have anything you want to add, Sheriff?
Just I'll answer any questions. You did good.
I'm just gonna ask one, but the jail still stays in Madison? We still have our Norfolk jail, and there'll still be a Madison County jail?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
This is just dispatch?
Just dispatch.
Yes. We have a 4 single person cells in Norfolk, and we're only 24-hour temporary holding facilities. So every day the sheriff's office comes and picks up our prisoners and takes them down to the main jail in Madison, and that will all stay the same. Our renovation process we're going to give up our conference room and our classroom to make room for the dispatch center, to make it for the size that we're going to need. It'll make things tight in the building, but we believe this is the best next step in our processes.
With all the upgrades to the communication with the radios and towers and everything in the last year and a half, everything will talk between the 2.
Yes. Fortunately, I don't know that this was necessarily planned, but over the years, Madison and Norfolk had the same types of equipment. We've upgraded them at approximately the same time, so when it comes time for bringing their equipment over, it's all the same, and they'll just plug in, like I say, there's some towers and antennas and things like that we need to adjust, but the main consoles and the majority of the equipment is the same.
And going forward also, once they combine, Madison County does have what did I read, like 30%? Or roughly number that they'll pay, because we're gonna start maintaining the dispatchers, the equipment.
Yes, part of this agreement, as I said, running a dispatch center is expensive. We also contract with a couple other entities, Stanton County Sheriff's Office and Hoskins Fire and Rescue. And what we did is we looked at what the expenses were after we took their income into account, and Norfolk will pay 2/3 of that, and the Sheriff's Office will pay 1/3 of that. And that's based on all the budget analysis that we did based on calls and staffing and budgets, and we took all that stuff into consideration to come to that. So yeah, Madison will be 1/3, Norfolk will be 2/3.
And will the city then go and request the budget from the city of Norfolk, and the county will then just pay 1/3 of that, or will the county also request 1/3 from the sheriff's department? Will they request 1/3 from the Madison County?
This will be a Norfolk dispatch center,
Okay.
staffed, maintained, budgeted, and then we will invoice the sheriff's office, or the county
Perfect.
for a third each year. And then, I mean, we went through the budgeting process with our best estimates as we were building this. Once we have a year under our belts, we'll reassess all those values, and it'll still be, you know, Madison will pay a third, but our prices may go up or down depending on what the reality is after a year of hands-on experience. But we're pretty comfortable. We got pretty close based on all the analysis that we did.
All right, I got one more. So the commissioners agreed to this. Was there a timetable set, or is this indefinite unless it's decided between sheriff's office and Norfolk that they want to
There is
dissolve this?
I believe it's I have to go, I don't remember.
It's 3 months or something like that, isn't it?
There is an out option, if for some reason, but there's a lengthy notice process if either one of them wanted to, if it wasn't working out for some reason.
Yeah, for some reason, you know, the county would want to pull out, which I do not foresee. I mean, everything, we're dotting the i's and crossing t's with, you know, and, because this only makes sense. We're one of the last areas in the state that still has 2 911 centers. And with what's coming here in the future for the next generations of 911 computers and everything like that, and they just heard a bunch about taxes here, that would be double taxing a lot of the city of Norfolk for doing in here and then doing one in Madison. It made more sense to put it all together right here, so.
Well, and that, I don't necessarily have a question, but it leads me to make the comment that I'd like to thank you two law enforcement leaders for being the two that came together and said, let's find a way to get this done. And it makes economic and logical sense. It also takes open-minded leadership. Would venture to say this, you know, wouldn't have happened 5-10 years ago, but because of the partnership that you guys have been able to find together between the agencies, this can move forward and, again, help save taxpayer money and create a more efficient system, I think, altogether as a whole. So I think this is a good development. It's a smart development. It's time to move forward.
I agree.
I'd like to add that, you know, as we're going through this process, it you know, forced us to go through and analyze every workflow, every process that we're utilizing, and we were able to find some areas of improvement. And, you know, this will be a better product. You know, it's not going to be like, you know, we're taking over for somebody else, or, you know, it was a matter of, it's a joint effort that have undertaken, and it's going to be better for everybody, including the citizens of Norfolk, because we're able to come up with some better workflows and better processes as we're looking at every little detail of our dispatch center.
I'll add, I think it's going to be a benefit for the entire county.
Sure.
Because everything's together. I know when all the fire departments, when they, you know, there's big fires and all the mutual aid comes in, you know, and you got 2 different dispatchers trying to work between there. You're all throwing it together. That's going to help out with our fire departments quite a bit on that stuff, especially when we got those big events going on, or the big accidents that are right on the edge where we have Norfolk Fire and Rescue coming out and helping people, and we're trying to direct and stuff like that too. It's bringing everything together, and it's common sense, and we got to the point where we're going to tell you guys you got to sign it tonight. So.
And our goal, and it says October 1st, I believe October 1st is a Friday. We don't want to make the transition on a Friday. So we're looking at October 5th. Now, the possibility is there. I mean, we still have a lot of moving parts that we're pulling together. We believe we're going to be ready to go. I mean, the possibility is there. We may have to wait a day or two to finalize a last cross a T, dot an I. We're going to be doing testing before we go live, because, you know, obviously what we do is very important and we can't afford downtime. So we're going to have all those, as many of our processes worked out before we actually go live on what we believe is going to be October 5th.
Okay. Anything else? I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion, council?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the agreement is October 1st, but they'll actually kind of start working on things October 5th, so the agreement's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably for budget purposes and things like that, it's October 1st.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 19 would entertain a motion to consider approval of a master service contract for construction, engineering, and inspection services with JEO Consulting Group Incorporated for an amount not to exceed 5% of construction.
Second.
Motion and second. And Steve, could you give us some background on this, please?
Mayor and council, generally when we do contracts for professional services, it's a single contract for a single specific scope of service. However, over the years, we have where we end up with a favorable contract, favorable terms and conditions. We'll come back and amend that contract in the future for additional scope of services. We've done that a lot with Black and Veatch as one example. We used a contract that was written back in 1997 and continued to amend that for about 20 years. What this is basically structuring a master services agreement versus a single contract. The agreement itself sets the terms and conditions, one of them being that maximum fee of 5% of construction. With the terms and conditions or the master service agreement set in place, then we come back over time and add task orders to that for individual projects. And so this agenda item has the master service agreement with JEO for construction administration services. There is a template task order attached to that as well. And then task orders 1 and 2 are also attached. Task order 1 being for the Norfolk transfer station for $150,000, and task order number 2 being for the 2018 US Highway 275 trail undercrossing project for $24,000. Each of those task orders does describe in detail the scope of services that we would expect to be receiving for that task order, specific task order. One of the reasons we're bringing this forward is that we have several projects going on where JEO has been part of the team. Benjamin Avenue, that'll be an upcoming construction project here. They were part of the team that was selected. Obviously, the construction administration services on that will be substantial. And so, since they're going to be here and be working on that, the other 2 projects we have is the Johnson Park, the First Street Bridge replacement, the River Bridge, the intersection improvements at First and Brosh, and then some of the projects that will be in the upper Johnson Park area as well. So those are all kind of under JEO's umbrella for construction services. So bringing that all together under a master service agreement actually lowers our anticipated fee as a function of all of those projects for this service. The cost of this is part of the budgets for each of those projects. This is not an additional cost that those projects see. It's part of our budgeted expenses across all of these projects.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions?
Steve, is it common for other cities similar to Norfolk to have a master service agreement?
It is. It's for sure on the construction services agreement. In cities that don't have per se an on-staff engineer or city engineer, some of our smaller communities around here, smaller class 1 cities, will function off of a master services agreement with whoever their engineer of choice is. JEO functions as a city engineer for many communities. Olson functions as a city engineer for many communities. I'm sure Manelli Wagner and their contractual agreements with the county kind of functions under that master service agreement as well.
Do you have an approximate estimated savings?
Oh, the budget, the budget for, say, a project like Benjamin Avenue, we were budgeting upwards of almost 10% just for construction administration on that project. So the cap at 5 is a 50% savings just on that project. Of course, on a project of that scope where they're already here, it's not like you have to be there all day, every day. There's plenty of opportunity to slide off and pick up these other projects. So the other thing it does for us as a staff is it's easier to go to one consultant, one project lead, and sit down and work through all of your projects that you have in construction versus having to coordinate multiple consultants.
Any other questions or discussion?
Just one more. The time frame on this agreement?
I would see the time frame of this agreement staying in place, you know, as we had the task orders, the task orders would disappear, but at that point, it still just, it sits out there. It's just, as the task orders finish up, those projects finish up, Benjamin Avenue will be out there through probably 2023. Some of the Johnson Park work and river work would be extending out into that 23 timeframe as well. But after that, we would have to come back with another task order for any specific project and get your approval on that.
Anything further?
Steve, how do you, what would be the process for determining whether it's worth it or not? Let's say in 23 or 24.
I would say it's probably the scope and size of the project, the status of where we are in terms of internal staff within our engineering department and our ability to service those projects internally.
Okay. So you and staff would be able to determine, and hopefully this doesn't happen, but you would be able to say, you know what, these guys aren't as all they're cracked up to be. We haven't been happy, and you can terminate this agreement at any time?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further comment? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 20, entertain a motion to consider ordinance number 5748, amending the dates and times that permissible fireworks may be discharged and limiting the dates and times that permissible fireworks may be sold to June 28th through July 3rd from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. and July 4th from 8 a.m. to midnight.
Make an offer consideration of ordinance number 5748.
Second.
Motion and a second, and for some background on this, please, Danny Myers-Nolly, our city attorney.
Mayor and council, the ordinance that's before you tonight came about after a subcommittee that was called last month on August 9th, based on complaints that were given to both elected officials and staff, I'm presuming following this year's fireworks season. Currently, the city of Norfolk has a 10-day sales and discharge allowance. What is here would reduce that to a 7-day sale and discharge allowance, and it would be for June 28th through July 3rd from 2 p.m. until 11 p.m. for both sale and discharge, and then on the 4th of July, the sale and discharge would be from 8 a.m. to midnight. Happy to answer any questions I can. Yes, previously was from June 25th through that 4th of July. For the 25th through July 3rd, it was that 8 a.m. until 11 o'clock p.m. So this is going to reduce both the sale and the discharge window.
Questions or comments, council?
I've been contacted a couple of times by people who are against the ordinance, the way it's written now, the way we're trying to pass it, on not only as private citizens, but also those who are selling the fireworks. They've had discussion with gentleman who runs more than one stand. He talked about educating the citizens as far as timeframes that they can light them off. And I somewhat agreed with him when he said that 10 days versus 7 days is not going to stop your after 11 o'clock shooting, which is the big issue, shooting late at night. I don't think he'll agree with me when I say that I think the started selling at 2 is not a bad idea because they don't start at 8 in the morning. Kids are running around and go buy them and sell them at 8, buy them at 8 in the morning and start lighting them right away. So I think that needs to be discussed and visited because I do think that they do lose a little bit by cutting 3 days off of their sales.
Gary, I have a tendency to agree with you on the cutting 3 days off the sales because the 10 days basically established so you can hit 2 weekends. So families can have 2 weekends to light fireworks off. Say you're out of town one weekend or it doesn't work for you, still have another weekend possibly to hang out with your family and light fireworks. So I would agree with you on that part.
The gentleman that talked to me today called, are you here? Okay, now you said something about putting signs up in there. Okay,
Go
you
ahead,
come
come
forward and
forward.
talk.
You want me to sign in?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm Eric Sanders from partner of Fly By Night Fireworks here in Norfolk. Yeah, we talked about signage, and I sent an email out to everybody. I don't know if everybody got it, but we kind of had this discussion down in Columbus about, I think it was 2017 or 2018, same type of thing where people were shooting after hours and they're not supposed to be in. They did not change the times, but they offered to educate the public by putting up signage. So we made, I think I'm not sure in the ordinance that I sent you had the actual size.
It said 4-inch letters.
It's big, you know, and it's on all 4 sides of the stands. And it's in English and Spanish both. Says the hours and the dates and times when we're supposed to be shooting and when we're not. I've offered or mentioned to take it even a step further and make up a flyer that we could actually, once you decide on times and dates and what have you, to hand out to our customers as we're selling, to try to educate them and let them know that, you know, and we do that. It's on our website, it's on our Facebook page, dates and times when you can sell them. But we still get a lot of people that ask, you know, how long can I shoot? What time can I shoot till? You know, how long do I have tonight? So it's something that could be expanded on. So I thought maybe if we could make a flyer up, hand it out to them and talk to them as we're selling throughout the period to educate them and to say, hey, you know, we need to be stopping at 11 o'clock, guys. And midnight on the 4th, or we're gonna lose these privileges.
Eric, have you found that through your conversations down at Columbus, did it help? Or
I
you got any feedback?
I have not gotten any feedback from them as far as that. No, I haven't. It's kind of, no news is good news. But the police chief was there. We did an extensive series of talks and meetings on it. And some of that signage was already there. We added the English and Spanish and times and dates and when you can shoot into that. So
How long
I
has
just
this-
like an opportunity. Yeah, go ahead.
How long has that been implemented now, Eric?
Like I said, I think it was 2017 or 2018. Like,
3-4 years.
yeah.
What's your take? I'll be honest. I've gotten a more than I thought emails, phone calls about in favor of reducing from 10 to 7, and no comments on time. So I'm curious on your take about those. And I'll be honest to everybody. I think 2 o'clock seems just a time thrown out there, weird, odd. I think 8 in the morning's too early. But I don't know if 10 is too early, but 2 seems too late. So give me your take. I can understand a lot of community members wanting less days. So that's a tough one. But you have 2 things here that's changed.
Yeah. The 10 days that's pretty tough, because if you take any, we're not a 365, 24/7 business. We got 10 days to do our business, and that's it. And if we lose any days in there to weather, which we have, your sales, it goes from a good year to an average year, depending on what day it is. If it happens on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, it's, it's not good. And it's happened. So taking days out really anywhere in there, it's just a loss. It gives you no time to recover if anything happens during that time period. As far as the time start, I don't have any particular time that I've thought about, as I just found out about this Thursday. I can see where 8 in the morning's too early, obviously. Especially we got a lot of shift workers in this, and I'm one of them, that would have, I even got woke up by fireworks in my own neighborhood all the time. So I can understand that and simplify, or with that, as far as what time to start, I don't know, 2 might be a little late, noon, I don't know that. I'd like some more input from the other fireworks guys that sell here, maybe. I don't know if that's possible or not, to still talk about this or not, but yeah, the time could be adjusted. I'm not against that at all. I believe the 10 days, though, 10 days, try to do what we do in 10 days is, I mean, you go ask any of these guys that run these stands, that ownerships, it's tough to try to do that amount of business in 10 days and make it all flow, and anything goes wrong, any hiccup, and you lose a day to a storm, which we did last year. Lost 2 tents, 3 in the morning out there putting up tents and putting things back together, trying to get ready to sell. So
I believe where the 2 p.m. time frame came in is for the shift workers that originally have said the 8 a.m. is too early. If you work a 7 to 3, maybe you don't get to bed till 8 or 9, and you got to be up at 2 to get ready to be to work at 3.
Sure.
I believe that's where the 2 p.m. time came in.
I see.
I agree with Councilman Grandquist. I have gotten a lot more comment to take it from 10 days to 7 days, and I'm going to speak of a couple of them, and then the last one is probably the one that we should remember why we're celebrating the 4th of July and why we're celebrating Independence Day. The first one comes to be is that it came from people that own animals. Dogs hate the fireworks. They have a hard time with their animals for those 10 days. So that was the first one. The second one was the shift work. And the third one is that I had a veteran call me today, read our agenda, and he said, I ask that we do the 7 days, because some of us have come back for our freedom for this day, which our fireworks come from another country, and for 10 days I suffer with PTSD, and I re-see what I saw overseas all over again. And I guess out of respect for my veterans, maybe that should also have some reflect to the 7 to 10 days reduction.
Yeah, I understand that. Simple.
And I'm gonna piggyback on that just a little bit too. I really do like your fireworks discharge signage going on those tents. I think it's a great idea. It should probably be there regardless if the time changes or doesn't change. But the 10 days does sometimes go over 2 weekends. And I get it if you're gone one weekend, but sometimes the 2 weekends is too much for some of the people. And that's the comments that I've been getting as well, is that's one weekend, they understand it. 2, they feel is long.
So I'm gonna hit on that a little bit. It's not necessarily being gone, but being in a shop environment where you might only get one of those 2 weekends off. I'm one of those also.
Me too.
So you don't get a choice sometimes,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we work what we have to work, and we're told what we have to work. So having that one weekend or the other weekend, I compare it to deer hunting. I kind of, thank God I get 2 weekends for rifle hunting too, but, because I don't always get a choice. So that makes it difficult. On the signage thing, I think that's an excellent idea, but that's Fly-By-Night's idea, and if it's something that we should maybe incorporate, it should probably be all stands and not just something that happens at one stand. So personally, I think we table something like this and think about it a little bit longer, review something like that, and possibly have that as part of this ordinance as a thought or idea, and maybe draft a little bit better options. So I know we have more discussion to go, so I'm not going to say let's vote on tabling that right now, but that's where I'm leaning, to be honest.
It is kind of coming.
So, are there any more questions for Eric before we move forward in discussion? Because I think somebody else wanted to say something.
Yeah,
See,
Eric.
Eric, thank you. Thank you very much for your comments.
I'm Jane Uzell, and I don't speak officially for them because I've not been an active member of the Music Boosters. I'm a mother and a grandmother now of band members. That's one of their biggest fundraisers to support the music within Norfolk, and the bands and the choir and the orchestra. And Norfolk's known for all 3 of those statewide. And it would be a shame to take 3 days of that away from them. And the other one is, I understand veterans with PTSD because I have a son that served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He takes his vacation because he loves to celebrate the freedoms of the United States with the fireworks. And so there's both sides of that. I would hate to see it go down to 7 days because I agree with the 2 weekends. The chance of families to get together, neighbors to get together. And you might also notice that I'm older, and yes, I go to bed earlier than that 11 o'clock time, but it's 10 days out of 365. And I ought to be able to handle 10 days of disruptive sleep. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Kathy Sanders, and I am also co-owner of Fly-By-Night Fireworks. I do operate the stand at First and Norfolk Avenue. One of the things I just do want to point out to the chamber council members is the revenue that it would cost the city of Norfolk if you would cut the times and the days down from 10 to 7. That's actually a month's worth of sales revenue in the city of Norfolk, because you have roughly 10 stands, 11 stands, times 3 days gives you a month. And that's quite a bit of money that the city is going to lose out in sales tax. Also, if you want to cut the hours back to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, wherever this came from, we have a lot of people that come from out of town to purchase fireworks. And if they come in town and they can't come till 2 o'clock or purchase till 2 o'clock, that we lose out on that opportunity also. So, and regardless, moving the times is not, we're not opposed to, but leaving it to 2 o'clock in the afternoon is too late for the purchase of fireworks or any type of product as that goes. So.
From that perspective, would noon start time, you think, make more sense? If you have people coming from out of town, maybe they're stopping to get lunch, whatever the case might be.
I would prefer it to be a little sooner, maybe not lighting the fireworks off so early, but being able to purchase them, say 10 o'clock, but maybe a noon shooting time would be
I was
something.
wondering the same thing. Why do we have the purchase time and the actual,
I think that would be,
at the same?
I don't think that would be a good idea personally. I think if they buy it, they're gonna wanna shoot it, and to sell it early and to say you can't shoot it for 2 hours. Maybe you simplify things. Maybe since it's 11 p.m., maybe you go 11 a.m., 11 p.m., so you just know the 11s.
That's a good idea.
Would help you with the earlier sales, but yet,
Yeah.
I think that would be much easier, because I think it'd be constricting so you can buy them at 8, but you can't shoot them till noon.
Yeah.
People would get that mixed up, and then we'd have more phone calls.
I guess I do have a question. I don't know if there's a specific ward or section of the city that has more problems than others as far as people not abiding by the rules.
I know in Ward 4, I get a lot of phone calls, probably 25 to 30 of them.
I agree with that as
During
well.
the season? Sorry.
Crazy ward.
Yes, but
What's going on in Ward 4?
It's a party.
It's
But I know that the law enforcement has been called numerous times. I've called law enforcement for
That's what I would've been
neighbors.
Ward 4, I guess, probably.
And, and the hard part about it is by the time law enforcement gets there, the people are already inside. They have to catch them in the act
Yeah.
of physically doing it before they know the people are doing it, they can see it in the driveway, unless they actually physically see them do it. So I feel for our guys on the streets, because they're getting bombarded. I know 911, they call 911 instead of just calling the police department. I get them at home, 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, I got people calling me. Not much I can do about it.
Yeah.
But I know it is an issue, and I think we all have that somewhat in all of our wards. We're just trying to come up with a common cause to help everybody.
Yeah. But, I mean, we are dog lovers in our family too, so our dog does not like fireworks. So we have to take care of that too. But I just want to point out that, shortening the days or the times significantly like that would really cost the money, city some revenue and taxes.
Kathy, I got a question.
Yeah.
If there's a family, and say 5 families are gonna set out, and they've budgeted to spend $200 on fireworks for this season, and they can either divvy it out $20 a day for 10 days, or they can do the math and spend the same amount of $200 in 7 days, how does that affect the taxes?
Well, depends on what time they come. Or if they would come, I mean, they would have, of course.
They have,
That's-
all they're doing is
yeah.
spending their $200 in 3 less days of the season versus all 10 days of the season.
But that would eliminate the time they could come. What if they didn't live here in town? They'd have to travel.
Across town?
To come to Norfolk. Because we have a lot of people outside of Norfolk. I mean, we're talking Sioux City, Missouri, all over. South Dakota. We have a lot of construction workers here in town. They go home for the weekends. They stop by the tent and purchase hundreds of dollars worth of fireworks to take back home to Iowa. So if we were closed for 3 days, they wouldn't be able to come. If they were leaving on a Friday and we couldn't open till Monday.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Sarah Abler. I'm one of the owners of Fly By Night Fireworks, and heard a lot about the budget tonight, and it's evident the city wants more money, and that comes from sales tax revenue in large part. So it may not seem like a big deal for other companies to be closed for 3 days, but that's a third of our selling period. And like Eric said, if we're affected by rain or it's too dry to light fireworks, that reduces our time even further. And we have a lot of stand operators who depend on this money, like to help meet their budget or maybe go on a vacation. And it's also a nice family event for them too. In terms of shift work, Kevin and Eric and Kathy have all been on rotating shifts. For Kathy, not anymore, but for years. So we understand shift work and sleeping during the day. In terms of PTSD, Eric didn't say it, but his dad was a Korean War vet with 3 Purple Hearts. My dad also served in the U.S. Army during the Korean War. So we appreciate our veterans and we understand some needs that some may have, but we also know that there are many that like to exercise their freedom and light fireworks. In terms of the animals, we own a cat, or we own several cats and a dog. Used to own a couple dogs. I've been involved with the animal shelter for over 14 years, serving 6 of those years on the board and volunteering or coordinating the volunteers and a lot of fundraising for a couple more of those years. We understand that animals get stressed, and we feel for you because our animals don't like it either. But it's 10 days, and we take our dog out early in the morning and after everything quiets down at night, and feed them before the fireworks start in the evening, and we keep them downstairs or in an interior room with a TV or radio on, and we haven't used it, but some people use the Thunder Shirts. There's also products that can alleviate stress and anxiety in animals, CBD products, herbal supplements, essential oils, homeopathic remedies. I'd be willing to work with some vets that I know personally to try and determine the most effective and safe products that we could possibly sell at our stand for dogs and cats. I like the idea of having handouts for things people can do to help alleviate the stress for their animals, and we can have that also available in our stands and put it in every bag that goes out. There are other things people can do with their animals, like I said, keep them indoors, white noise, or other music drowning them out, close the curtains, give them a new bone or toy, just to keep them interested. So with that, I think I've touched on everything. As I said, sales tax revenue, it's not just our stands. There's several other stand operators, and you take all their sales, and that's a big chunk of change coming into Norfolk. And this city council and mayor and chamber of commerce are always saying, support local, buy local. And we have come upon several roadblocks ever since we've been in business, with streets being blocked to our stands and stands being down over $15,000 for 2 or 3 days. And we were closed for almost half of the selling period. Thank God we had a good 4th, because those stand operators were really felt defeated, and they're like, what the hell are we going through all this work for? And we're not even getting traffic. And the parade route was disrupted one time, and that affected our Alco stand. And there'll be more construction on that bridge and First Street, and I can't remember, by Johnson Park. So, you know, it seems like some of those are unforced errors, and we're always having to try and, you know, make something work. One other thing, you know what? Communication and respect seems to be lost among neighbors. You know, if people can say, hey, I know you have dogs, I know you don't like the fireworks, but we're planning to have something on Saturday night, you know, and talk to them. And that goes a long way for promoting goodwill and getting along with your neighbors. Are there any other questions? And by the way, we're not thrilled that we have to buy our product from China. The United States has made it very difficult to produce anything like that. And we are affected by cargo ship containers, or a limited amount of space on cargo ships, a shortage of shipping containers, all sorts of geopolitical issues, longshoremen strikes, shortage of truckers. You have no idea what it takes to get a product from China to the United States to sell. We take out a loan every year. We have to buy our fireworks a year in advance. And even then, sometimes we don't get them on time. So we're sitting on a loan for a year, and we have this tiny window of opportunity to sell and pay down that loan. And every year, there's always something that happens. This year, we only got probably 60% of our product before the trailers went out to the stands. And we had 2 deliveries. After sales started on Friday, we got a load in on Monday and a load in on Tuesday. I put over 5,500 miles on a van this year trying to get product to those stands. People think fireworks is just 10 days out of the year. There's a heck of a lot more that goes into it. So we understand the shift people. They may not be able to celebrate one weekend. You know, it's just more flexibility. And we're all about freedoms. Probably won't find better or more committed patriots than we are. So we would just ask that you leave the 10 days as is, and I would go along with reduced hours, like 11 to 11, except for on the 4th or weekends, I think is amenable.
Thank you. All right, council. A few things to discuss. What you have before you tonight is whether to pass the ordinance as is, amend it, or table it for further discussion. So,
Well, as the ordinance is written tonight, I don't support it, but I would be willing to compromise and amend it, you know, so I don't know if I kind of go along with Corey on the times of maybe possibly tabling this and then putting something together and getting it back in front of us.
I think it's worth tabling so that the proposed signage idea from Eric, or fly-by-night, however you want to call that, that we can have some discussions maybe with other fireworks stands and make that as part of the ordinance when they apply for that permit to run that stand. Something like that would be in agreement with them. They know what's coming that way. That would be something that they would have to do, rather than this just being at fly-by-night stands. That's flyers and just a sign. This would this would be part of that
What I think-
ordinance. I think there's room for improvements on this. Obviously, the 11/11 seems to be taking hold, and that's not a bad idea. We haven't talked necessarily about the 4th of July, whether that's 8 to midnight or 11 to midnight. But I think we could do a little bit better by tabling this and make it a good compromise for everybody. Because we are all hearing it about the dogs, about PTSD, obviously from stand owners. The hardest part is to just make the great compromise. So
I think we're
I don't
hearing a
think
lot.
we can do it right here, right now.
Like Rob said earlier, is that when people are for something, they're gonna come out and speak for it. You know, and at work today, I went and personally talked to everybody around just so what they thought about it. Because they actually came to me, a couple guys did, and they were like, they weren't in favor of it, and so, but they would have never said anything had I not asked. So I think there is some truth to that, even with this measure.
I joked with Harns, I probably shouldn't say this on the record, but my wife says let's go with 14 days instead of 10. So I didn't mean for that, but I think there's a compromise. So I'm going to make a motion that we table this and draw up a better document.
I'll second that.
Okay, after we have the motion in a second, we can't discuss anymore. So if we have any other questions, let's do that.
I would just say perhaps we can make the signs in the United States.
Maybe even in town.
Maybe right here in town.
Well, I do agree putting some type of signage, and I do appreciate that being brought forward to our attention. I do like that maybe being in the ordinance, so anybody with a stand will have to follow that same signage. I do like the 11 to 11. I do want to just kind of point out, though, a couple of other cities. I know Columbus is similar to what we have right now, time-wise, but you do have Grand Island, Fremont, Hastings, Kearney, Lincoln, North Platte, Omaha, all with fewer days than 10. So it's not like we would be, the only city to reduce from 10 days. So just wanted to make that comment.
Gary?
I was just gonna say that I think it's important that when we sat down to have the fly-by-nights and the other stand owners there, excuse me, and have them have a little game, part of the game to educate, and maybe down the road you gotta revisit it if the education doesn't work and they still aren't working, but I think we gotta give this a chance first.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Corey?
How does this affect public safety going from 10 to 7 days? I'm sure it eliminates some hazards from our fire personnel and our police as well.
Chief, would you care to address on the spot?
You got them both.
Certainly, Mayor and Council, this is a topic that, quite honestly, I've talked about off and on for 40 years in my career. This whole topic, I've seen it evolve in multiple places, and the things on the counterpoints on both sides of this are exactly what I've heard repeated for years. Eric, I've had the privilege of working with Eric over the years as a regulator. He runs a professional business. Everything we've ever asked him to do, he's always done. So he's not the root of the problem. He happens to be in the business of selling fireworks, but he's not the one creating the issues that we're discussing here today. But this whole topic of trying to balance this incredible compromise you're all talking about has been central to this forever. And every time a change has been contemplated, it's gotten at some point a point of discussion trying to figure out what that sweet spot was. And so the things you're all talking about are all prudent and appropriate, and they're representative of a lot of good, smart folks talking about this over the years. As it relates to calls for service, can't point to any direct activity this year. We had a very quiet year in the fire department in terms of fire and EMS response. We had no major structure fires, no major injuries that you would typically see. There's been good years and bad years in that regard, and I could tell stories all night about some of those stories I prefer to forget, and many years where there was just very small incidents of those things. This past year, we couldn't use that data as a catalyst to bring this to the forefront. We just didn't have that activity. So even though they expanded the list of permissible fireworks in the state of Nebraska last year, there was some anticipation of that being, making a difference and adding to this particular issue. We didn't see that in terms of calls for service this year. It just didn't materialize. So I don't know if that was an anomaly. I don't know if that's a trend we'll see forever, but there certainly wasn't a direct correlation to that and calls for service in terms of serious fires or serious injuries related to fireworks that we responded to in Norfolk's jurisdiction. So,
From the law enforcement side, I didn't come prepared with any statistics, so I can't throw them out there to you, but, you know, whatever you decide, whether it's 7 days or 10 days, we'll have the same law enforcement issue, so it's really not going to affect us a whole lot, one way or the other. One of the things, the questions I get is on the night of the 4th, you know, people who watch our calls, they see there's this huge number of calls on the night of the 4th of July, whatever that is, and that's every year. Obviously, the Big Bang Boom festivities get out late, and then everybody wants to go home and finish off their fireworks, which is their last day. There's a lot of calls because we self-initiate on that night. It's already late, and we're seeing the fireworks going on, and we don't have the time to spend a lot of time with each one, and so we're just going around warning people that they need to shut it down for the night, and that's why you see that big number on the 4th of July evening. As far as the rest of the calls, it's pretty consistent, whether, like I said, whether it's 7 days or 10 days, we would respond to the same number of calls. And people call us when they're not happy, so we get the complaints like you're hearing you're probably getting some of those phone calls. You know, how come they're going off this time of the night or this late, or why aren't we doing more? The people who like the fireworks don't call us. So I'm not going to be a very good source on who likes them, who doesn't like them. It really won't affect us a whole lot in the big scope of things. So
Okay.
I'm not going to help you on that front.
All right, thank you both. Any further discussion? Well, we allowed for further discussion before the official second. So if there's a motion to table, I think it needs to be done again.
All right, I will make the motion that we tabled ordinance number 5748.
I will second that now.
Okay, motion and second, and since there's no further discussion on a motion to table, I would ask you to vote, please.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Okay, that moves us, takes us to the end of our agenda, but item number 21, which is public comment period, which is done quarterly to allow for anyone wishing to make any kind of comment on anything they so wish, can do so now. Okay. Hearing and seeing no one, we'll move to conclude this meeting of the Norfolk City Council. We are adjourned.